993fm.com. That's 99THREEFM.com.
Hey, welcome to 99.3 Call letters KJBU. I'm your host, Maleena Lawrence, for today's special show, giving a shout out to Juneteenth celebration. We are kicking off Juneteenth weekend with a very special guest, my dear brother, Milton Bowen from the 510. We all the way in Oxnard. Welcome.
First, I want to acknowledge the greatness of the Golden State Warriors.
Can we do a dual acknowledgement though? Can we just give 3 seconds? And we don't even need a moment of silence. We need hand claps. We got sound effects up in here. Dub Nation, shout out to Dub Nation, yo. It went down last night. I didn't even see the game, but I saw the game.
Oh yeah.
Because I felt the love. I was on the freeway.
In the immortal words of Steph Curry.
What'd he say?
This one hit different.
Yeah, it did. It even felt different. Man, we needed that win.
Yes, we did.
We needed the win just like we didn't want the move.
Man, but you know what? The move was a homecoming.
Okay.
I mean, when the Warriors first came to the Bay from Philadelphia,
yeah,
they came to the city. So them going back home was a homecoming.
Was a return.
So I didn't look at it, being an Oakland native, I didn't look at it as a sad thing. It was like I embraced it, understanding the history of the team. I mean, the reason they're called the Golden State Warriors is because they've actually played in multiple California locations. They're the only NBA franchise that can say they've actually held home court throughout the entire state. Mm-hmm. And that's why they call themselves the Golden State Warriors.
You know what? And so it is. And so it is that we taking home that championship. I might even be at the parade, yo. So shout out again to all the Golden State fans, to Oakland and all the Golden State fans outside of the Bay Area. We look forward to being welcomed home ourselves.
Definitely.
And I just want to say, first and foremost, I am honored to be here. I'm an honored guest host today here on 99.3 FM with my dear brother Milton. And in the shout out, what I like to do also is shout out before we get started into this whole People's Art campaign, this national movement, even a global movement, if you will, but bringing it home right here to Oxnard for the Community Advocacy Coalition. I want to give a shout out for their programming and their contribution to not only celebrating Juneteenth, but being an advocacy day one for community radio, yes, for radio hitting the frequencies of talking about and keeping at the forefront what it means to literally advocate and have black radio and interview people like the iconic Milton Bowen here on 99.3 call letters, y'all. Don't forget these call letters. KJBU. Just be you. And that's what it's all about. Just being you, especially when it comes to Juneteenth and celebrating all that we have to talk about and talking about giving back, talking about just being you. Milton, being you all these years as an artist.
Yeah, it's been some years.
So let me tell y'all real quick. I met Milton in Oakland, California, when I actually had just moved to the Bay Area. I was 3 years in. I was a newbie. I was like a fresh newbie doing everything like I was born and raised with the Black Panthers. Straight up. And I ran into Milton in the community. I saw his art, and we started talking, and we couldn't stop. We just was building. I was like, I want you on my show. And I was like, I had talking about community talk radio. I had a community show on Comcast.
Yes.
And all I could do was envision your art in our studio. And when I saw your images and I saw how you portrayed black people in that moment, and we talked about you just getting started in that moment with your exhibit, and at that time, you can tell us where you call that space in your life as an artist. But when you came into our studio, this is how long, Milton, it's been since 2001, something like that. It was like 2001, something like that, when we first met. Mm-hmm. And my mom was dressed in my set along with some of my friends. And my mother remembers you. I told my mom, yo, Mom, guess who I'm interviewing? Milton Bowen. She said, oh my gosh, I remember his studio and da-da-da-da-da. He is, what is he doing now? I know he's got to be big. I said, Mom, he is. Just like his art is big, he is growing. His art is changing lives in people's rooms and homes and narratives. And so shout out to my mom for still remembering you in our conversation. And she remembered the Frederick Douglass painting.
And what's funny is that collection that you showed that hadn't ever been seen before. Like when I did your radio show, those were actually still works in progress.
It was my TV show, by the way.
Yeah. So
yes.
the collection had never been seen before. And ultimately, that show would go to open up at the African American Museum and Library downtown Oakland. And it was called Can We Spare Some Change?
I remember Can We Spare Some Change? That was the whole title. It was self-titled. The show was self-titled, remember?
Exactly.
Can We Spare Some Change was self-titled. You blew up the Bay. It was just like a renaissance. You, Kadinji, Isu, like all the artists that came out during that time.
K-Dub. Yeah, gotta
Yo, shout out to K-Dub. All y'all cats.
Roz, who's actually in LA now.
Roz, wow.
Yeah. But it was interesting because now those works, like the Frederick Douglass piece that your mom liked, it's in the private collection, the permanent public collection of Laney College.
Are you serious?
Hangs in the student union.
Give thanks. Give thanks.
Works from that collection are all over the country. Some are now archived at the Driscoll Center at the University of Maryland.
Come on.
They are. You could find them. Cam owns 2 of them.
Which ones does Cam own? Because I'm near Cam, and we can also make sure.
Martin Luther King, People Magazine, Time Magazine, Malcolm X.
Wow, we gonna have to make some field trips, y'all. Out there, y'all hear us? We gonna have to make some field trips to Cam, and if you're in Maryland,
the Driscoll Center.
And moving on, I want to move into. That's a little bit about y'all. How long we've been doing this here. And how long Milton has been in his plight of creating art and making art viable and visible in our community. But before we talk about that viability and even the iconic images that you create and make noise with, because I feel like your art makes noise. It has such a strong message. It's almost like one of the messages you wake up from a dream and you can hear your mama saying that favorite quote, or your grandma hitting you with that favorite quote, or your daddy talking about, look, don't ever give up with that Muhammad Ali image. all of those iconic Black people that come through periods of time that have endured so much. Because we're speaking on this weekend is the heels of Juneteenth celebrations, but Juneteenth itself, the whole entire proclamation of freedom. Can you talk about how freedom bursts through your art and how it speaks, how you like freedom to speak to your audience?
Well, I mean, for me, I take pride in being considered or referred to as a Black artist. There was a time not too long ago when you would have artists that didn't embrace that quote unquote tag or descriptor. Like people say, well, I don't want to be referred to as a Black artist. Just refer to me as American artist.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how you are referred to, whether you're referred to as a Black artist, an American artist, or just an artist. The situation doesn't become any less complicated. Being an artist of color is always going to be complicated because art history never carved a space for artists of color.
Speak.
So I take pride in that for a lot of different reasons, but the most immediate reason I would say is because just like Juneteenth, I had a cultural awakening. I mean, I went to art school from 7th through 12th grade.
Okay.
And didn't learn anything about African American artists. The only
I'm sorry, Milton. You said from 7th to 12th grade. You didn't even learn about a Black artist.
No, didn't learn about any Black artists, and ironically, the Harlem Renaissance never came up as a part of any curriculum that we had at an art school.
Just the music.
Yeah, but we were a totally visual art school. Like budget cuts happened in my seventh grade year in Oakland, California. So the art school, the arts magnet school that I went to, which is the Renaissance School of Arts, they got rid of all of their music, theater, and dance and became solely a visual arts school.
Wow.
And anybody that knows the Bay Area, I mean, it's located as just a group of portables that is right across the street from the California College of Arts and Crafts, which is now the California College of Art.
And I'm saying, wow, like I don't know, right? Seriously, because when I came to Oakland, they were cutting the PE programs and then the rest of the art programs.
Yeah.
So that's when I came. I was like, how y'all have public schools or schools, period, when charter schools even, when they started cutting the physical education classes along with the art classes. But for you, from 7th to 12th grade, okay, you're not exposed to art, black art of any kind, making an imprint in this world. And not to mention the country, U.S., that is, y'all. But then you said you had an awakening.
Yeah.
When was that awakening? What happened?
Well, people have to understand, like, if you're, when I was coming up, the primary inspiration for most young people who were creatives, who like to draw or sketch, was actually JJ from Good Times. I mean, that was our role model. I mean, he was the one singular force that we could see every week on TV doing art. Not knowing that Ernie Barnes, the artist who did all of that work, had a degree in art, was a professional football player, and was collected by Norman Lear, who was the producer of Good Times. So you don't know that behind the scenes dynamic. Yeah. All we get every week is JJ painting these beautiful pictures. So I thought Jimmy Walker was the artist of that work. But the interesting thing that weighs on you psychologically, and in hindsight, being able to understand it, is the simple fact that you're told that art is something that is held in the highest esteem. You go to institutions and you got cats in blue coats that follow you around and tell you don't get close to the work. I mean, all of this is going on while I'm going to school. But every week, JJ could never use his art to get his family out of that Chicago ghetto.
I was just, you went exactly where my mind was.
So now you fast forward, I'm in my senior years in school, and I got to catch 2 buses to get to school. Like, I grew up in East Oakland, but my school is in North Oakland. So Dolores Bookstore, downtown Oakland, International Bookstore.
Shout out.
So every week on those newspaper covers, I was seeing Andy Warhol, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Keith Haring. I mean, this is the heyday of the pop art masters and the creation of neo-expressionism. You know you're a bad cat in art history when they got to create a genre for you.
Come on.
And that's what happened for Jean-Michel Basquiat. If you look up neo-expressionism, the only cat you're going to find is Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Come on.
And that was by design, because they didn't want to bring him into the fold of being a pop artist, because now you would have 2 masters holding that seat.
And he was so influential at that time, crossing over.
Yeah, and you're talking about generational artists. You're talking about Andy Warhol when he's in the twilight of his career, but you're talking about Jean-Michel Basquiat when he's just exploding and emerging. So you have to remember, I mean, Basquiat died in 1988. So I graduated high school in 1985. I'm seeing this play out in real time. But there was a disconnect, because he's the only cat that I'm seeing that's a part of the art industry. See, art history and the art industry are 2 dramatically different things. So being an art student, learning the history of art, and seeing artists like Jean-Michel Basquiat not being included in that conversation, yet he's one of the most popular artists in the world, because I'm seeing him on the New York Times, I'm seeing him on the Los Angeles Times, I'm seeing him on international publication. So you struggle with your place in art.
Yeah.
And then to really, play a mental trick on you. Every year when we would field trip to museums like the Oakland Museum, the Palace of Legion of Honor, the De Young Museum, you don't see things that reflect you in your community.
Yes.
So I would go to the Oakland Museum, but the Oakland Museum is a California museum, but it wasn't the Oakland that I grew up in.
Right. It didn't reflect.
Not at all.
At all.
And I would have my struggles in public battles with curators from the Oakland Museum over the years, after finding my stride and starting to build a collector base and get some notoriety for what I did. I would approach the Oakland Museum and try to broach these conversations and bring that to their attention. Because what people don't understand is like, you know, as a young person on a field trip and you go somewhere and they're telling you, you know, everything in this institution is exceptional. So this is the thing that we struggle with, because the average person doesn't realize, you know, on a Sunday afternoon when they go to a museum or a gallery, that they're not just taking a leisurely visit somewhere. They're actually participating in something that's called the art world,
right?
Whether they realize it or not.
And that exceptionalism, did it or did, I'll let you answer it, but just so that y'all know, did that term of exceptionalism, or even the illusion of exceptionalism, include the image of Black people, the image of Black lifestyle, abstract notoriety from Black artists?
Well, let me put it like this. The average person doesn't realize that regardless of what institution you go to on a Sunday afternoon, whether it be the Oakland Museum, the MoMA, the Guggenheim, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, there's probably only 2 to 10% of exceptionalism in the building.
Defined as?
Artists who actually are moving the needle with work that is changing how art history and the understanding of art history has to be looked at or reckoned with. The other 98 to 90% of what you're looking at is privilege. Because who makes the decision that goes into these institutions? So, for example, prior to 1942, the art world in America only existed based on textbooks, the regionalist movement of art. And most people, when I say that, they're not going to know what the regionalist
I was like,
movement of art is.
what's the regional? What's the regional?
But you know it. You just didn't know what it was, because the most famous painting that comes out of the regionalist movement of art is American Gothic, which is the old farmer couple with the pitchfork with their house behind them.
Yeah.
Now, everybody has seen that image. It's been appropriated. You see it everywhere. But that is probably the signature painting from the regionalist movement. Most of those artists were American muralists, like Thomas Hart Benton, who actually was the instructor of Jackson Pollock. Now, they don't paint anything alike, but Jackson Pollock studied under Thomas Hart Benton and then would go on to become the godfather of abstract expressionism. He changed the art world with a mistake. Abstract expressionism actually exists because of Jackson Pollock. He opened the door for William de Kooning, Motherwell. So when you start to think about how art history is a series of cause and effect, you can open up an art history textbooks right now on any university level, any high school level, when you're studying art history, and the first movement you're going to run into is either going to be the regionalist movement of art, which is not in all textbooks, or the first New York School of Masters, which is the abstract expressionists. But I have to pose a serious question.
What is it?
I'm not a math major, but I know the 1920s come before the 1940s.
Facts. You made me think.
So in 1920s, the early 20s through the early 30s, we had the Harlem Renaissance.
And where was that? Back to your point, where was the Harlem Renaissance? Within the textbooks and within the museums?
So the Harlem Renaissance, this is going to be simple. Y'all stay with me for a second. The Harlem Renaissance
right here.
is located in Harlem. The abstract expressionists operated in the Village. That's a few train stops away.
I was about to say the Village in Harlem is like boom, boom.
So you have a few train stops, but you have 1920 to 1930.
Right.
And then you have 1940.
Bookend.
I don't need to be a math major to know that the 20s and 30s came before the 40s.
Right. Facts. So where are we as we look at, thanks for the lesson, by the way. I'm serious, y'all. This is historic indeed within the time period that we're sitting in, because what we're actually doing in this moment, and I thank you in advance, is that we are putting in context where we're going. Yeah. We're laying a roadmap for where we are, where we've been, and where we're going from the perspective, not just because you do go deep into the historical context, but also through the culture and the creativity of an artist. But you also, in the things that you said, I want to bring it back a little bit because it's all relative to the People's Art campaign, and it's all relative as to where our place is as artists in this world. We're born, I believe we are all born to create.
Yes.
As the Creator created each and every one of us, we're here to create, and being a creator makes your life worthwhile. And in saying that, you talked about that life frame in the context, historically speaking, as an artist, but the art also has an industry.
Oh yeah.
And
definitely.
I know we're on the pathway to saying, okay, I'm an artist. How do I take my art and amplify my art into this industry? In a myriad of ways, you enter the art world. So within that world, where you're in the world, but you're entering an industry as an artist, coming in and out of your own world as an artist.
Yeah, the tricky thing about that is this: if you're an artist, regardless of the level that you do art on, you're in the art world.
Right.
But that does not mean you're in the art industry.
Copy that. Now that's where I want to go. I really want you to nail it, because this is also getting into, I feel as though, the core of the people's art.
So think
and
about
the
it.
People's Art campaign.
Think about it this way. As we getting ready, we're sitting on the eve of Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm.
It's important for everybody who is listening to understand this. Juneteenth is not an isolated incident. African Americans have faced multiple Juneteenths throughout our current existence.
Yes.
1865 is not the only Juneteenth moment in African American history.
Mm-hmm.
I had a Juneteenth moment. It happened to me. 1992, Laney College. I come home from the military, just trying to use my GI Bill, and I enroll in Laney College because I was frustrated with the California College of Arts and Crafts, which I dropped out as a freshman to join the military.
Shout out to the veterans.
Why? Because there were no black art teachers at the college at my time. I literally had art teachers tell me, well, Milton, you've been taking classes here since the 10th grade, because I had made it to advanced art at my school in the 10th grade. So they would send me across the street to take the freshman level art courses at the college.
Mm-hmm.
So I had already had a relationship and knew all of those instructors over on the college campus. Receive a full ride scholarship, go there my freshman year, and I literally had my art teachers tell me, Milton, just erase the dates off of your old projects and turn them back in.
Stop playing.
And I'm like, well, can I take junior level courses or courses that are going to be going towards my major? Because I wanted to be an illustrator. Fine art wasn't even on my radar at the time. You know, I wanted to be an illustrator. The artist that probably inspired me the most as an artist is Norman Rockwell. You know, I just loved his mastery of painting. And I still today hold firm that Norman Rockwell is probably the greatest painter America's ever produced.
And you can feel, if any of you listening have ever witnessed or been in front of a piece that Milton has actually done, created, you can, hearing you and learning that you started off wanting to be an illustrator, you can actually feel the detail. You have so many nuances hidden within your work, but even your lines speak because they pop out the messages. And that's what y'all got to just check out his art. We'll get to that in a minute. But what I really enjoy about that, you know, your path as an illustrator and how you evolve, you can talk about that later on too, is very specific in the substance and the subject matter of how your art brings out so many different stories, so many different conversations. And to me, that's just what illustrators do for my life as someone who's visually obtaining a story from an illustration. So for you, how does that change? How did you navigate those blockades in order to stay true to your art in those type of situations?
Well, let me bring it all together because, like I said, I had that Juneteenth moment. You know, I'm at Laney College. I meet David Bradford, and sitting in the back of the class, just trying to collect my check every month from my GI Bill. He didn't allow me to not be present in the moment. So one day after school, he said, I want you to, stay after school. I got a couple questions. And I'm thinking, oh, what I've done. I'm in trouble now. You know what I'm saying? I thought I was under the radar.
What happened?
But he was like, young man, you've done this before. And then I said, yeah, and it's like, he pulled it out of me. He engaged me just from a personal level. And he started asking me questions. He started telling me about his background and, how he became to be an artist. He's like, you don't find too many young African-American men, that do what we do. And he was like, so when I see you doing it and doing it at this level, I'm curious. So he engaged me. And then, you get to a point, I'm telling you, man, it was like my Mr. Miyagi moment. He was like, wax on, wax off.
I was about to say, wax on, wax off.
He actually tricked me into a conversation about art history. And I love art history. And the thing about art history that everybody should understand is, like, when you study art history, you're actually studying world history. It's just through the lens of artists. But it's history. It's just through the lens of an artist. So we get into these deep philosophical conversations, and then ultimately we in there for about 90 minutes, and he say, boy, don't you know black people paint too?
Oh, Ashe. What'd you say?
He said, we've sat here for close to 2 hours, and you haven't told me anything about one black painter.
Wow.
And I hadn't, because I had never been taught about black painters. So he started running my game on me. So he went through art history with all black painters
What?
and
Checkmate.
sculptors, and was like, now look, young blood. We could talk about the Raiders, the A's, the Warriors, the Giants, hell, even the Sharks. But we can't talk about art until you could talk about black painters the way you talk about all of these European masters.
Was that your 92 Juneteenth moment?
That was my Juneteenth moment, man.
Yeah, because
Information unknown.
I was about to say the impact of when it's missing.
Information unknown.
Yeah, when something is missing that can impact your life and change it for the better, for the good.
Because those artists freed me. Because when I started to learn about who they were, those artists freed me. And ironically, it wasn't even a visual artist that gave me my breakthrough. It was actually Langston Hughes. So Mr. Bradford said, what you're going to encounter is simple. The art world is comprised of art history and artists who make up that history. The art industry is comprised of people placing value on creativity. He said, you have to understand the difference in those things. He said, but don't be fooled, because you're only as valuable as what someone else places value on you.
That's right.
So that started me thinking a little bit. And I came across this poem from Langston Hughes, I Too Sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh, eat well, and grow strong. Because tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. And nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am.
Oh, shit.
And be ashamed. Because I, too, am America.
I'm America, yes.
Now, if you look at that and you put it in context to Union troops showing up in 1865 in Galveston, Texas, those enslaved Africans, because we need to stop calling them slaves, they were free Africans enslaved in the Americas.
Right.
So those enslaved Africans, they didn't know that they were America, but they were. They are the fabric and the fiber of America. Just like if you open up an art history textbook and you don't see the Harlem Renaissance listed as America's first art movement, you see them in the back of the book listed as a cultural art movement, as if it's only making a cultural contribution to black people.
And not the world.
So I find this, I struggle with this when I do work in public schools. We use European masters to teach art across all aspects of curriculum in public schools. But when I go into these schools with my program and I start to use African American artists who are also masters in art, they're masters at what they do. There are more masters than Raphael, Donatello, Leonardo, and Michelangelo.
Absolutely.
The Ninja Turtles.
No, not the Ninja Turtles.
Oh, yeah.
You talking about the illustrator of the Ninja
I'm
Turtles?
gonna say it real slow for everybody else to hear.
Okay, let me catch up.
Raphael, Donatello, Michelangelo.
And then I woke up.
Those Ninja Turtles. We have masters too, because
wait.
there is a fifth Ninja Turtle, and his name is Langston.
Yes.
The turtle with the pen.
Yes, indeed. I was like, hold up. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it.
He's a Renaissance master too. So when we start to twist the conversation and put the emphasis on uplifting our creative value,
yes,
people seem to get uncomfortable with that.
And why is that? Because we have, and we're going down the lane within the time frame that we have to talk. We're going down that lane of the industry blending with the world and accepting our culture. Why is it a problem of black art being accepted for its fullness versus being in the back of a textbook where again, we can be in the back of a textbook, but at the end of the day, the index still remains that we are all through the index, just like the glossary, just like the table of contents. We are relevant. But why does society, not we, but why do you think society paints such a broad stroke picture about where we should be placed, as if they're placing us, like slavery, like know your place? Yeah. So a lot of black artists are fighting that still to this day, as to finding their place, knowing your place, learning your place versus taking and standing in your rightful place as an artist.
So the art industry is a private industry. Meaning that America has no regulations or no regulatory standards on galleries and museums. They're private. Even when museums have public funding, they are still in a special category in terms of accountability and how you can challenge what's in those institutions. So, for example, you'll have museums that have very low African American membership. Mm-hmm. So people in the community will say, well, why don't we see more shows of women artists? Why don't we see more shows by artists of color? Why don't we see more shows by artists that are, LGBTQ? Well, the museum is going to clap back on you, and they're going to say, well, if we look at our membership, these people don't have memberships to the institution. So if you haven't bought into the institution, if you don't have a member base, do you really have a say in what we put on our walls? Well, they're going to tell you no. So the understanding of, more inclusion in this conversation about diversity that has sprung up very recently. We're only talking about in the last 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years.
So now you're seeing
buzzwords, y'all. Yeah. Buzzwords.
So now you're seeing, this wave of African Americans and women get positions of, stature and promise, because I don't want to say power, in institutions currently. But it's going to be another 5 to 10 years before we actually see how that plays out. See, diversity is not just putting a person of color into a position. Mm-hmm. Diversity is actually diversity of thought.
Yes.
You can have people that have, pigment in their skin, but if they think just like everybody else that's been running that institution for the last 100 years, nothing in the institution ever changes.
Nothing will change.
You got to have diversity of thought. So we don't know if these new hires are actually going to be moving the needle or not, because we haven't seen what these, curatorial positions are what fruit is going to bear from that. And
you know what? You bring up so many good points, Milton, because within that diversity, within my spirit said conclusion, so I'll just say conclusion. Within the conclusion of inclusion, what I've noticed is that during we've had a whole new renaissance within the pandemic, within quarantine. I know artists in particular during quarantine who came out of their artisan closet, their artisan shells. Shout out to Be Beautiful LA, Shawana Davis, along with many other artists who came out swinging with their brushes, swinging with their pens, letting their art speak for themselves, for their mental health, for their healing, when the world shut down and the industry renamed itself, was redefining itself. So not including us. So this was like the first time in my history, in my life, where I could say that the art world, the artists within the world of art actually co-created their own worlds, didn't worry about a manager or a curator, which I would love your take on the role of the accountability and the role of a curator, as it relates to museums and exhibitions and how we are defined and how we are perceived, especially Black curators, and then white curators who are curating Black art. without Black thought.
Yeah.
I think that's very important because we've been in circles and in museums or galleries where our art is displayed, beautifully portrayed, but not the welcome of display was mute. The energy in the room was mute. Our art on the walls was beautiful and brilliant, but the energy and the atmosphere was mute. So before we get into the segment of the art, the People's Art Campaign and your tour and its impact, I would love to hear your rendition of inclusion when it comes to that definition and that perspective, along with the role and the importance of curators. And do you think curators are even being accountable to the direction of the importance of Black thought?
So the term curator today doesn't take the traditional form that it once did. Now, I mean, you have people that, put an art show up and they say, I'm a curator.
Yeah, I curated that show.
Exactly. But that's really not the role of a curator in its totality.
Okay.
You can say that, and there is some validity and truth to it, but that's not the role of a curator in its totality. But curators today, the only way to make this point is just to be blunt and candidly honest.
Okay.
Like I said, it's going to take a minimum 5 years, but realistically, it's probably going to be a 10-year window before we see the impact from Freedom Summer and the pandemic and how it has truly affected what shows we see in 5 to 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because when institutions are curating shows, they're curating for 3 to 5 years out.
Yes.
So the conversation we're having right now cannot make it into a museum tomorrow. A conversation we're having now wouldn't make it into a museum till 3 to 5 years from now. But how different will the conversation be when our conversation finally gets a chance to be heard?
Yes.
Sometimes it falls on deaf ears because the moment has passed. So understanding how that part of the art world works is challenging because we are just now starting to get recognition of work that was created in the 70s. We still have works that were created in the early 1900s, some in the late 1800s that still ain't got no shine. And we got works in the 70s that are now getting recognition. And I have to say this. You have Ernie Barnes, my man from Good Times, JJ. The Sugar Shack painting that was featured on the Marvin Gaye album cover just sold for $15 million in auction.
Just so. And so I get your point.
So now, stay with me for a second, though. But you ain't never had a William H. Johnson sell for $15 million. You ain't never had an Augusta Savage sell for $15 million. These are all Harlem Renaissance masters. You ain't even had a Romare Bearden or a Jacob Lawrence sell for $15 million, and they're post-Renaissance masters. Household names. But JJ done sold for $15 million. Changed the game.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between art history and the art industry. But those two do work simultaneously together. Like the average person don't know who Milton 510 is. Honestly, they just don't. But they've seen my work before.
Right.
I mean, I have partnerships with the Oak Park Brewing Company. I do art for beer cans, and we do exclusive releases. And every one of my can releases, there's a hashtag attached to it. Get knowledge wherever you can. Because I only do art that has something to give back in terms of information to the community. So we just worked with the Tupac estate, and we just did the Holla If You Hear Me that is just got released. I saw
that. Yeah, that just got released.
Fixins, LA Live, the Tupac Takeover, Power Mecca Cafe, former NBA standout Dream Teamer KJ, former mayor of Sacramento, owns the Fixins restaurants chain, the franchise. They just transformed the LA Live location into the Power Mecca Cafe, paying tribute to Tupac. This is all commercial success. This is all, so my artwork is attached to that project. So you can go there and see the artwork that's on the cans. We're talking about family approved, estate sanctioned, gave me the rubber stamp,
Yeah.
but Pac was the homie,
Yeah.
I actually knew him,
And you even, in speaking of that, just to derail, but it doesn't derail. It just goes to show how full we are and how many layers. We're not one dimensional or linear people or individuals. You do have a music background. So, because tell the people real quick, as an artist, what's in your repertoire?
Now,
in your past life, you was what?
I used to do a lot of work. Like I said, I want to be an illustrator. So I did a lot of commercial work, early on for the different Bay Area rappers and was in that rap scene, not as a rapper, but as an artist. I mean, I've always stayed true to form to being a visual artist in doing that. So I played a different role behind the scenes, but I've worked, and have long-standing friendships with, a lot of people in the industry. The interesting thing about this art thing that I think that I want everybody to understand before we get into the People's Art Campaign information is like the art world is a complicated thing, but doing art is not complicated at all.
How do you manage that? How do you manage a complicated thing and find your simplicity, your peace, your own world so that you maintain your creative rights for yourself?
Because the first thing you should be doing is not trying to satisfy any marketplace or any agenda. Those things are going to take care of themselves. What you should be trying to do is find your authentic voice in what makes you happy. See, I'm happy learning about Black folks.
I love it. I feel it too, y'all. I could feel his happiness. I feel your joy. I feel your beautiful rebellion,
The excitement of having my own personal Juneteenth moments, that's what excites me. I want to discover information that has been kept from me. I want to learn about things that I didn't know so I can immediately try to share them with as many people as possible. And in essence, that's Juneteenth.
Yeah.
So like I said, I mean, when we land on a jewel or a nugget of info that like had been kept from us for like a long period of time, that's not something to be embarrassed or ashamed about. When we look at, we have our ancestors, our enslaved Africans that were in Galveston, Texas, who had no idea they were free.
Was it 2 years?
They were still doing the work. I mean, the Emancipation Proclamation was 1863. They didn't show up in Galveston until 1865. Like I said, this is simple math. We ain't got to be sitting up in here, hitting figures to figure out this math. You know what I'm saying? The point is, it's simple though. It's like they were still there, still surviving.
Yeah.
And then when they got that information, freedom is something that you can't take from them.
Yeah.
So that's the whole thing. So you got to be free in your own mind. You got to be free in your own space. The physical understanding of freedom has nothing to do with mental freedom. So Malcolm says it best. He says, if you're south of Canada in America, you in the South. This notion that America, was just this utopia in the North, all of that is just, narratives that are being created. So when we look at like these moments of independence, these moments of discovery, as an artist, you can have your own Juneteenth moment anytime you want it. All you got to do is pick up a book. There's these things called encyclopedias that people don't
remember the
use.
Dewey Decimal System, encyclopedias. Milton, remember libraries. No, physical libraries that you walk in and you say, "Hey, Miss Johnson," and they're like, "Third floor." Where's the bibliography? Third floor.
And when those don't work, you could go to Google. You know what I'm saying? You can go to Google. But
Right.
I'm saying there are ways that we can touch on resources. There are ways that we can access information. We don't have to wait for people to give us, narrative or direction. We can find that narrative. We can create our own narratives. We can find our own directions on our own. And I always encourage young people is like, do what makes you happy. Take paths of discovery that are going to make you happy. I tell people all of the time, I get misclassified as an artist all of the time.
What do you mean?
When I did my show in 2003 in Jack London Square, and everybody thought in Oakland, it was called I Just Want to Paint. But the subtitle of
that one too.
The subtitle of I Just Want to Paint was actually me, myself, and the other guy. I broke my life into 3 sections. Me, you only know your family and your immediate circle, like whatever they tell you to do. I mean, I'm the baby of 10 children. My artistic signature comes from my family. 5 boys, 5 girls. I'm the 5th boy and the 10th kid. That's why I sign all of my artwork Milton 510. It's not because I was born and raised in Oakland, because to keep it real, when I was born in Oakland, it was 415. They changed it to 510.
And when I moved to the Bay Area, it was 415 in San Francisco side, then 510 on the Oakland side. You got to cross the bridge to get that 510 area code.
You can credit that to Pac Bell.
Code. Yeah.
So the whole thing behind that is
5th child out of 10.
Yeah. I'm the 5th boy and the 10th child. That's 510.
Talk about star math, though.
So the whole thing is like the me part was just the work in that section of that collection was just all about who I was and understanding family. So then myself is when you actually grow up and now you start encountering law enforcement and being stereotyped and harassed. I mean, this is Oakland, East Oakland. So I'm keeping it real in that myself section because you're learning about who you are and, like you said, them trying to keep you in your place. Then you get to that other guy. That other guy is self-exploration. That other guy is coming into knowledge of self. That other guy is saying, well, wait a minute, no, I have rights.
Navigating that.
I can read the Constitution like everybody else. So that whole coming into understanding was that thing. And people thought that Oakland had opened a brand new cultural museum, but it was just one solo show all by me. The Oakland Tribune called me an angry artist because when the reporter came in to do his so-called review of the show, he only focused on the middle section.
It ain't your fault. Your art just caught it.
So now we got over 150 paintings in this space, and you want to focus on roughly 30 pictures and call me an angry artist. So did the San Francisco Chronicle. So now, I took it as a badge of honor.
Yes.
So looking at that, though, I understand one thing, and I'm going to give this to every artist who was in earshot and listening. I've never seen a statue of a critic erected in front of a museum.
Me either. No.
So why am I giving energy to somebody who's given an opinion on what I do and they don't do what I do? And frankly, they really never take the time to fully investigate or get your perspective on why you did it.
Right. Did they ask the basic questions versus versus being the critic?
Exactly.
And that's fine. Keep it pushing.
So
Look at you now.
Until I go to a museum and see a critic statue in front of it, I'm taking everything very lightly in terms of what they tell me is valuable and what they tell me is exceptional. And
to your point, the value is in the eye of the beholder, and to whatever the art industry makes it. Is that
so quick funny story before we transition. I love Andy Warhol. He's probably one of my favorite artists, and I think Andy Warhol probably is one of America's greatest artists. Everybody has seen these Campbell soup cans, but they don't understand them, and I know they don't understand them. Because when Andy Warhol did that collection, there was a review of his work, and what the critic did is went to Safeway and took a picture of the actual Campbell soup on the shelf, and he said, you can go to this grocery store and get them there. They're a lot cheaper. This is what he said about Andy Warhol's work. Now, when people don't understand, that Campbell soup collection did not open in New York. That Campbell soup collection opened here in L.A. at the Ferris Gallery. That's where they first were exhibited, in Los Angeles, not New York. So the funny thing about this story is this. Those Campbell soup cans are contemporary still lifes. They are probably one of the most groundbreaking contemporary works of art ever produced. Not just because they're commercial, it's because of the America nostalgia. See, Andy Warhol was a child of the Great Depression. He had a childhood illness and he grew up during the Depression. So his brother and mother nursed him back to health on Campbell soup. So he grew up with Campbell soup his entire life. So when he gets old enough, graduates, college as a designer, comes to New York and is dabbling in this art industry, he lands on doing commercial objects because he didn't want to be like the abstract expressionist. You had a couple of the bridge painters getting busy, Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns, but he wanted to do something different. So he lands on this contemporary still life, which is Campbell's Soup. So now, let me put this into context. The term soup kitchen and bread lines all come out of the Great Depression. If you are a Wall Street banker and you pick up the Los Angeles Times and you see tomato soup on the front cover of the Sunday art section,
You gonna get it.
you're looking at that. And it's like, it's not a joke to you because your parents struggled during the Great Depression too. Then they weathered hard times. They were able to send you to an Ivy League school. Now you are making tons of money as a financier in New York. So you call LA and you say, can I buy chicken noodle and tomato? Because they was your mama and daddy's favorites.
Yes.
So the owner of the Ferris Gallery, he was getting calls from all over the country. See, the critic thought it was a joke, but the people didn't.
Right.
Because they had a nostalgic personal connection to that work. And the owner of the Ferris Gallery was like, Andy, can I buy all of them from you? And Andy was like, sure. Andy Warhol sold all 32 some odd pieces, the entire Campbell Soup collection, to the owner of the Ferris Gallery for $3,500.
Wow.
Do you know in 2003, the former owner of the Ferris Gallery sold those paintings to the Metropolitan Museum of Art for over $100 million?
Get out.
You would have had to invest in McDonald's when it was a lowercase m to get that return on your money.
Facts. Talking about value, but you also not just the money. I understand the money train of in the history behind it, but what I really took away from that shared story was where the art came from.
And now
it connected with the people.
Now I'm about to hit you with the gut punch.
What is it?
We go from $3,500 to over $100 million in a relatively short period of time because of the American nostalgia. But here's the bigger question. Why, when I do a painting about grits, don't nobody call me no genius?
I was going to say something, but I'm going to... I was talking about shrimp and grits on my way here today.
Because the funny thing is, I do paintings about the importance and the cultural importance of the staples in our life, in our diet. And what people don't understand is like African grits sustained an entire civilization.
Absolutely.
Black folks were sustained on grits because when our enslaved ancestors were brought to the Americas, they had a primary vegetarian diet. So they resisted. By not eating was a form of resistance. Of being enslaved. So what sustained them was grits. So for everybody to want to make fun and poke fun at grits or even try to come and assault and attack soul food, which is a tradition that I hold very dear to my heart, you have to understand one thing. I don't think no enslaved African was counting calories during slavery.
I don't think so either. And now that you spoke it, maybe the grit theory will all change and it'll be a collector item in our future. I'm just saying that in real talk, to see that, to hear that analogy.
Because when we uplift what we do, when we uplift our cultural traditions, we allow narratives to come in and actually make us and our own people
and redirect,
look down on what we're trying to uplift.
Exactly.
So I'm just unapologetic in my approach. I don't let nobody tell me what I can celebrate and how I can celebrate it. So that's where the People Art Campaign comes in.
You know, I was getting ready to go there. You are just a great segwationist. A segwationist. You are the bomb segwationist. We gonna make up words because that's just what we do to uplift. So before they kick us out the studio, we do got to talk about this People Arts Campaign, Milton, and what brought you to Oxnard. I mean, and there's so much to talk about even behind the People's Art Campaign, but for the sake of what it is, where it's going, what you're doing, the message you're uplifting. Let's just start tell the people about the People's Art Campaign.
Well, first we got to thank all of the people that brought us here for this.
Let's do that.
You know, we got to thank,
I'm looking at all these sponsors. I'm looking at all these community sponsors, and I'm so grateful.
Channel Islands, Oxnard Community College,
Parker Enterprises,
the
Community Advocacy Coalition, where we at right now,
99.3 FM.
That's
right. I had to give my teacher.
But you got. Let's give it all. KJBU, just BU, y'all. Okay.
So, ironically, this
Oxnard
one is
College. Yeah. I mean, since we just doing it, let's just do it, right? Oxnard College, the Central Coast Minority Enterprise Resource Affiliations, the Port. Shout out to the Port. And shout out to Delta Sigma Theta as well. We just appreciate you, Open Door Studio. And before anything, Attain Design, I just want to say thank you, too, to a special shout out to Attain Design. And back to Milton Jacobs, who is our special guest here today in the studio, talking about the People's Art Campaign right here on the campus of Oxnard College. Milton, what is the People's Campaign? The People's Art Campaign.
So the People's Art Campaign was designed for two reasons. When we look about art and we think about art today, a lot of people think that fine art is inaccessible. Like they don't have access to it because you hear about art that is being sold for like millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. So this campaign was designed to create original works of art and make them accessible and affordable for the people. So, and this one is uniquely special because, ironically, I really only do these collection releases online. Mm-hmm. But this is the first one that we're doing as an actual in-person exhibition at the Open Door Studio that will take place tomorrow between 12 and 4 during the Juneteenth celebration here in Oxnard.
Awesome.
So this one is a uniquely special one for me because it gives me an opportunity to actually in-person engage the community and share more about why it's important for us to control our own family heirlooms.
And speaking of family heirlooms, shout out to our hashtags, you guys. When you show up this weekend in Oxnard, please tag us and use the hashtags, hashtag Juneteenth Icon Collection, hashtag People's Art Campaign, follow Milton at Milton510. Milton, you mentioned our own family heirlooms. What is the value and this is like an important for you to know, like if you're talking to young people or a generational audience in this day and time about the importance of collecting Black art. And you know what? I know we only got 3 minutes left, but I just got to throw it out there. When you collect Black art versus African art, is there a difference?
It's a big difference.
Okay, let's answer the first thing and go right into that before we wrap out.
So the one thing that I like to focus on is the African American experience.
Yes.
Which is unique to itself. And that's what the People's Art Campaign is designed to do. But I don't just focus, the People's Art Campaign is all about all people. So it's not just about African American icons, it's actually about all people. It's just through the lens of an African American artist, mm-hmm. which happens to be me. Mm-hmm. And that's what art and art history is about. Like I said earlier, when we study art history, we're just studying history through the lens of artists. So that's how I approach this information campaign that I'm on, because I make art to educate, not just decorate.
Right, and when you mentioned that earlier, the art for, let's just take your collection, the Icon Collection for the People's Art Campaign. What is the value of a young person obtaining, because the art, the price point for the art does vary, allows individuals to purchase art and become collectors, early collectors at a younger age versus thinking, I know for me, I used to think that you had to be of a certain age to collect art growing up. I had to be a real adult with making real money. And now I realize that I wish I would have bought certain pieces because I value art, but I didn't have the knowledge to value what it meant to be a collector and create family heirlooms. I come from a family of artists myself. So for you, if you're talking to a class, an intergenerational audience, if you will, how do you explain the importance of becoming a collector and passing on that value of artistic ownership?
Okay, so that's a very layered question, but mm-hmm. I'm going to give a quick little history lesson as we close this out. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't even know why churches have stained glass windows. Stained glass windows were created to bring a pictorial image of the scriptures for those who didn't read the Bible. So that should tell you right there how valuable imagery is in influencing and understanding a narrative or a story. So what you have in your home will impact and influence anyone who comes in contact with what you have hanging on your walls. So the question becomes, what do you really have hanging in your home?
I like, you know what? I can pat my braids and my scalp because it's itching and just end on that note and ask you to tell the people. Because I feel like that's a homework question. That's like that's a real homework question. And it's a good place to end. But before we do so, let's tell the people once again where they can come to actually see the exhibit, purchase art, talk to you.
We graciously being hosted at the Open Door Studio, which is in Park Plaza, where the Juneteenth celebration will be taking place tomorrow. We are going to be doing a very special, very brief program on stage where we're going to be acknowledging the people who made this all possible.
Yes.
That's one of the things that has to be underscored is like, I truly appreciate the partnerships of people who understand and want to help advance this conversation about art and history. So we're going to be doing that on stage, but the Open Door Studio is where the actual collection is being hung. People can come in, see the work, mingle, talk with me, purchase the work. It's priced across a variety of different price points, but nothing is priced over $510. All of the artwork is priced, based on numerology.
A brother on purpose, yo. A brother on purpose. A brother on point and on purpose. And on that note, Milton, before we get out of here, where are you going to next? Where the people, when I think campaign, I think a movement. I think it's going where's the next stop?
Well, that's the thing. That's the reason why this one is so unique, because the next one is going to be an exclusive online drop.
Yes.
And they usually are done across my social media platforms. I've done them on LinkedIn. Sometimes I do them on Twitter. I'll do Facebook. I'll do Instagram. And I just move them around. Because everybody's not on all social media platforms. The reason why this one is so unique is because we have an opportunity to reach people who are not on social media and in a different part of California that, I'm more popular in.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's like, I have work at LA Live, I got work at Dodger Stadium, but people in Oxnard probably don't know that. You know what I'm saying?
I didn't know you was at Dodger Stadium.
Oh, yeah, man. Jackie Robinson, 42.
Yeah, I didn't know the 42 was at Dodger Stadium.
Oh, yeah,
and you can also find Milton's work, the works that he is actually shouting out right now in this moment, you guys, all our listeners, please follow Milton on social media. I'm most familiar with him on Instagram, which is at Milton, MILTON 510, as in 510, at Milton 510. This great artist, good brother, just a very insightful educator through whatever he creates. I'm telling you, his work is loud and purposeful. And if you haven't seen it, you can be in Oxnard this weekend at the Juneteenth celebration, tomorrow at the Open Door Gallery. You can also find Milton online and stay tuned to the next art drop and sales and your opportunity to actually become an art collector. If you're already a collector, spread the word and come through, swipe up some of his art. And Milton, all your other social media handles, please shout them out.
I'm Milton 510 across all social media platforms except for Twitter. They did me dirty. You got to spell it out. Milton 510.
No comment. Shout out to Community Advocacy Coalition. I'm your host, Maleena Lawrence, and we are live on 99.3 FM. Call letters KJBU. Stay true and be true to yourself. Thank you, Brother Milton Bowens, for just being here. Reunion. Thank you so much for the reunion. This feels real good. Happy Juneteenth, everybody. Peace.
You're listening to 993 FM KJBU Oxnard. Live streaming at 99THREEFM. That's 993FM.com.